On the last two episodes, really to start season 5, we've been talking about navigating this quote-unquote future of work. Now in the third episode, as companies around the globe have been transitioning, back to work, we also know in the midst of all of this is that we can't lose performance. So again, we've identified trends and leadership teams, tips and keys for leading in this kind of environment of the last two episodes. But today is going to be about a reminder. Your culture is not your building. And I'm going to remind you of that today, and we're going to talk about how our buildings are not our culture. Your culture is the ecosystem of thinking, acting, and interacting that takes place within those walls or outside of those walls. Welcome back to The Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced. The best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world. Hey everyone, it's Jason, and welcome back to the Thermostat Podcast. We are in Season 5 and already rolling along. Welcome back for everybody who has been along this journey along the way. Welcome back. Any new listeners out there? I know many new listeners are joining, so welcome. So glad you were here and a part of the Thermostat Podcast. For those of you, the OGs, people that have been here since the very beginning, welcome back and thank you. New folks, hope you go back and check out Seasons 1 through 4. Great stuff in the earlier seasons, amazing and compelling interviews, small micro pods with great added value content. Hope you'll check those out. So, as always, excited to dive into another topic today and to be with you. I want this to be a space in your day, in your week, in your month, however you are accessing this content. I want this to be a ritual for you, a time where you set aside, some of the smaller podcasts, maybe 20 minutes or so, up to 40, 50. Longest podcasts on here are really going to be about an hour. So if you've got a commute, a drive, whatever that may be for you, I hope you set aside some sacred time to step back, to allow this to be a place for you to think, for you to be filled with positive thoughts and encouragement around leadership and the culture that you're creating in your own life and work. And in the midst of a very noisy, distracted, divided, and really just a complex world right now, I pray and hope that you are finding moments to step back and to connect to your own thoughts and to be filled with good stuff, to be thinking about how are you going to navigate your way forward. So I'm more convinced of this than ever, as you know, that authentic leadership and creating compelling cultures, whether that's in our teams, our organizations, our families, our communities, is needed more than ever. So thank you for joining in. If you would do me just a favor, one quick favor, a thank you. I hate that I have to ask for this, but this is just the way that things work. If you'll do me a quick favor, if you will rate the podcast 5 stars, of course, that's very helpful. If you'll leave a positive review on whatever podcast platform you're using, all of those ways help amplify these messages further in the world, help it to reach more people so that more and more people can find these based on the algorithm. So rate, please, review, please, and then also share. If there are colleagues, team members, people in your life or work that should know about this podcast, I pray and hope that you will continue to share it with them. Because that is a wonderful, wonderful way that this spreads, and that's the way that things amplify in the world today. So, on the last 2 episodes, really to start Season 5, we've been talking about navigating this quote-unquote future of work, this phrase that so many places are writing about and talking about this. What is the future of work as everything's been happening with the pandemic and shifts around the world over the last 2 years? People have been trying to identify what is the future of work. and what's that going to look like, and how are we going to be innovative in the way that we create environments and spaces where people want to be a part of, and what is the future of work going to look like? I've been sharing trends and observations and thoughts about the future of work on the last 2 episodes that I hope if you didn't hear, you'll go back and listen to. Now in the 3rd episode, as companies around the globe have been transitioning, back to work, quote unquote, back to work, we're still although I know people have been working all this time, but we've been working remotely and in a strange world. But as we come back to now negotiating with every team and organization of what that future of work is going to look like, we're still in a new era of remote work where there are going to be remote workers. And so many people around the world have said, hey, I want to stay remote, or I like the remote, or companies have realized that they can leverage remote working in really effective ways. And then there have been a whole lot of people also that have said, no, I need to be back in the office. I'm more effective. I need to be there. I want to feel the energy and be with people. And then also people are trying to navigate the whole work-life balance. Certainly with everything that's been happening in the world over the last 2 years, people are reevaluating, are stepping back and saying, hey, how do I think about what kind of environment I want for my work and the meaning that it plays in my life, and certainly the balance of work and life. We also know in the midst of all of this is that we can't lose performance, that results matter. And so teams and organizations and companies, of course, that they also have results and objectives and goals and things that they're trying to create in the world so that they can continue to exist and so that people can have jobs. So, we're in the midst of this future of work and negotiating all of these things and trying to figure out where do we all fit in, and how do we then, for each individual organization, find that future of workspace that fits for them, authentically for your team, for your organization, without losing the performance and the results. So again, we've identified trends and leadership teams, tips and keys for leading in this kind of environment of the last 2 episodes. But today is going to be about a reminder. Today's episode is a reminder to all of us in the midst of this talk about the future of work, is a reminder that your culture is not your building. Today is about a reminder that your culture is not your building. It's not your building. Buildings are important, and you're going to hear me break this down. Buildings and environments, certainly within offices and organizations and companies and spaces around our communities, buildings and environments are so important. They help enhance, or in some cases detract from culture, but they aren't your culture. They aren't your culture. They may help enhance or detract, but your buildings are not your culture. And I'm going to remind you of that today, and we're going to talk about how our buildings are not our culture, but what is our culture on today's episode. So I have been lucky over the years to collaborate with, to support many different companies that are builders, that are developers, are designers, are people that are doing and creating amazing spaces for people. And again, I want you to hear me say this from the very beginning, that buildings, spaces are very powerful. Aesthetics. I've also supported and collaborated with helping the leadership development and culture work at places like hotels and restaurants, and thinking about office spaces and off-site retreats. Aesthetics and the building and actual environments do, help enhance culture and help set culture up for success and create an environment where magical things can take place. Or I've also walked into companies, and maybe you're somebody that's done this as well. I've walked into companies or space in communities or universities or restaurants or places where the food might be great, or something about the element, the education might be great, or the what's happening within that company organization might be great, but the actual physical environment, the building, the aesthetics actually detract from what is actually happening in the culture. So I want to be clear here again, buildings and physical environments are extremely important and help enhance the culture, or in unfortunate ways, will detract from the vibe and really make those that are doing the work of creating culture even more difficult when the space doesn't align. But culture isn't the space. Culture isn't the physical environment. So your building is not your culture. Your culture is the ecosystem of thinking, acting, and interacting that takes place within those walls or outside of those walls. It's the thinking, acting, and interacting. And so it's not physical, although, again, physical environments help enhance and help create space for more authentic culture to be created. But really, culture is created by the way that we move, by the way that we think. From our thinking within our organizations, again, whether you're physically in the same space, the thinking of the mission and the vision and the values of why we come together and where it is that we're trying to go and the values of how we're committed and then the acting. So from that thinking, the acting that ties together our behaviors, our beliefs, the actions that line up with those values that bring the posters off of the walls and into our people. And from that thinking, that mindset to then our individual actions of the way we show up and how we do the job, not just what we do, but how we do it. And then lastly, our interaction. So every time we interact with another member of our team, anywhere inside the walls or again throughout a virtual environments, that we interact, that not just what we do, but how we do it, how we interact with clients and customers and people within the community. Our ecosystem of the way we think, act, and interact, that is where the culture is created. And so in all this talk about, back to work and offices and we got to get back into our space, again, for many places that's going to be important because there's energy, there's power in congregation to be in the same space together, and that's going to be great. And so it's going to be really important for many places to kind of get back into the same space. For others, it's going to be important, and they've realized they can be as effective and productive, and actually work-life balance, it can be a great thing for them to still stay remotely. But whichever environment you're in, the culture is not the building or the space. It's the thinking, acting, and interacting that takes place inside the walls or outside of the walls. And so regardless of where you are, the best, most innovative leaders, teams, and organizations are going to be the ones who are co-creating the culture together, are intentional about how do we develop and bring people in participation around that thinking to make sure our mindset is aligned and connected, to make sure that then we're bringing our mindset not just from our cognitive thinking, but into our actions and our behaviors. And putting our values into action. And then lastly, that we're making sure that we are rewarding and appreciating and developing and teaching the interactions that are in alignment with the culture that we're trying to create. So culture is not your building, although buildings and physical environments can either enhance or detract, but the culture is your ecosystem around your thinking, acting, and interacting. And here are some things that we know right now, the context of the world that we're living in and working in right now. I've referred to research. In fact, in the past, you go back and listen to a past podcast I did about the 10 principles of meaningful work cultures, some great research that came out recently. But in the environment that we're in right now, the research and studies are saying, this is what we know, that people are saying that they would actually, 9 out of 10 people would actually take a pay cut to work for a more meaningful culture, to be a part of a more meaningful ecosystem, a more meaningful work culture where the thinking, acting, and interacting brings out their best, is connected to a mission greater than themselves, helps them bring their gifts to serve something and to be a part of something that's growing and thriving and alive. And so we know that this is what people want. So in a world, again, where so much is changing and the war for talent is on and the big shift is happening and people are resigning, again, at record amounts. If you remember me talking about in the last episode about the great resignation that's happening, where people, record numbers recently, people have walked into their boss's office or picked up the phone or been on Zoom and said to them, I quit, I'm out of here. The U.S. Labor Department reported that 7.6 million people just in the months of April and May in 2021, just resigned, just quit their jobs. And they report that 41% of the workforce is considering leaving their employer this year. So we know that the context of that people, the stress and the working environments over the last 2 years with the pandemic and political and economic uncertainty and everything that's been happening in the world with social justice and a divide and just angst with people in the world. We know that this has been happening, and yet in a world like this, what the studies are saying is that people want meaningful cultures. They want to be a part of something they feel like they are part of, and where they see the leadership is helping them co-create something that's special. And so in this time of the big shift in the war for talent, culture, as you know, I say all the time, becomes our competitive advantage, because considering all things being equal, and even, again, the studies are saying people would take a pay cut, but even if it's not a pay cut, even if it's just all things being equal, and in this war for talent, people are trying to choose, will I go work here or there or over there? Where they are ultimately going to choose is the place where the culture is something they want to be a part of. And so culture becomes our greatest competitive advantage. And in this, it's always mattered, but in this time and in our history, leadership, leading and proactively leading that culture is as important as ever. Leadership matters. So I want to pause here just for a second to take a quick break, and then we'll be right back. But take a deep breath, step back, and we'll be right back.
Many teams and organizations right now are realizing they need to do both. They need to engage the minds and hearts of their people in person, bring people back together in person, and continue to engage the minds and hearts of their people virtually. So whether you're planning that next event, that power in congregation, the power and the energy that comes from bringing all your people into the same room, into the same space for that important meeting or conference, and you need a powerful keynote speech or facilitated team discussion or facilitated conversation that is the currency for change about leadership, about the culture that you're trying to create together, or the mindset that is needed to navigate all that is in front of you, whether you're planning that in person or you need to do that virtually. I hope that we can be a resource to you and support you in that effort. If so, contact us at jasonvbarger.com, at jasonvbarger.com, if we can partner with you to help engage the minds and hearts of your people in these important times.
So we're talking about the fact that leading and proactively shaping culture is as important as ever. We know the context of everything that's been happening in the world that I just outlined. We know that people are thirsty for authentic leadership and meaningful cultures. They want to be somewhere where they feel like they are contributing to a mission greater than themselves, where they feel cared for as an employee, as a person, that their strengths are appreciated, that they have a role that helps them contribute, and then also that they are they are a participant in co-creating a culture that can exist on our own. It requires us to be in relationship with one another and to co-create something, a brand, an experience, a mission that's greater than us. That's what people are saying they want. And so we know that leadership and culture matters. And here are a few things, a couple of tips that are musts right now if you're thinking about your team, your culture, and realizing that culture isn't your building, that it's that ecosystem. Then here are a couple of things that leaders and cultures must be doing right now. One is that they have to proactively connect with their people. We have to reach out. We have to go to them to serve. We can't wait for people to come to us. We need to open the doors and go to people to serve. And so we need to connect with people and make sure that we are sitting with and empathizing. Again, whether that's in person, and again, as you've heard me say on past podcasts, teams and organizations that now have been opening back up a little bit are realizing the power in congregation and being in the same place, or at least every so often getting their people together for an offsite retreat or something. In these kind of environments, again, in person or still virtually on technology platforms, we need to make sure that we're reaching out to our people, we're connecting, we're allowing people, we're listening to them, we're inviting their feedback, and then we're empathizing with where we are in the context of where we currently are living and experiencing. And then in the midst of that, of not stewing just in the context, but then we need to provide clarity. So leaders and cultures right now are providing, the best ones are providing great clarity, which means we have to then return back to clarity around the mission. Why do we exist? What is it we're actually trying to accomplish? Not in the weeds of just what the next task is, but bigger picture. Again, let's return back to why do we do this? What is the purpose of why we exist and what kind of culture we're trying to create together? What is the vision for where we're going and what we want to be different next? And then let's make sure that we return back and look at and relook at. In some cases, this has been a great opportunity for organizations to kind of what I would refer to as revitalize their core values language, is to invite their people into a participatory process. I've led this with many different teams and companies, is to revitalize their language and take a step back and look at what are the values that we're going to need in order to drive the culture that we want for the future. And so the best leaders and cultures right now are making sure they, one, connect with their people, reach out, go to them to empathize with how they're feeling. And then two, they got to make sure that they are presenting a clear image of that, again, helping people return back to mission, to vision, to values. Thirdly, we need to involve our people and help them participate in the future culture that's being created. People want to participate. They don't want to just be told, hey, here's where we're going. They want to know, hey, here's the direction we're heading, but we need you to help us create it and be a part of it. You are an important piece of this. And so people want to contribute and they want to be a part of it. And so we need to seek out opportunities within our teams and within our companies to help people participate so that they can be a part of the future that's being created together. And then lastly, so the fourth thing, connect and empathize is one, clarity around mission, vision, and values is two, involve our people and help them participate in that future that's being created and what we want it to be, what they want it to be. And then fourth, we need to follow it up with action. So from those great conversations, from those posters we have on the wall, from those intentional things that we've identified about the context of what we're experiencing right now, then we need to identify, okay, well, what are those next actions that we're going to put into place that are going to help us stay committed to creating that culture? Whether that's the way we hire or the way we onboard, the way that we do performance evaluations, the way we do identify and develop emerging leaders, the way that we continue to create an ecosystem of thinking, acting, and interacting on the job, the way that we appreciate each other, the work-life balance that we are committed to creating, the results and the targets that we believe are realistic and that we are all committed to. All of those things require a follow-up with action. And the other thing that we know, those places that are staying focused on those four items, that there's a return on the investment. Again, we do these things not just for a return on the investment. We do them because we know it's important, that it matters, that we want to have an impact with people. And if we care for people, and then whatever it is your mission is or the purpose of your organization, that will come to life. But we do it because we want to care for people and we want to create compelling cultures because that's important to us. And then, oh, by the way, secondary is there's actually a return on that investment. The employee experience or creating a meaningful culture, all the studies and research say that somewhere between 2 to 5 times these companies that have a rich employee experience or a meaningful and powerful work culture, they are 2 to 5 times more likely to hit their targets, to delight customers, to engage the minds and hearts of their employees and retain employees, attract new employees, and attract new customers and a brand that people want to be a part of. And so there's a return on this investment as well. And so as always, with this podcast, I want to leave you with some questions, some things to ponder along the way. What are you doing right now to build that level of trust, to connect and empathize with your people, to create those authentic relationships with your people? What is it you're doing to build and go to them to serve, to reach out and connect and empathize with your people? Is your mission, vision, and values language, is it clear? And not just the language is it clear, but have you brought your people into participation? And what does it look like in action and behavior? The ecosystem of your thinking, acting, and interacting. And how would we begin to bring that to life and action over the next stretch of road in the midst of these challenging or these blurry times? And are you inviting your people into participation to help co-create the future that you are creating together, that future culture that you want? So I hope those questions leave you with something to ponder, something to reflect on, and I hope they stimulate some progress for you wherever you are along your path. In the next episode, we're going to begin a two-part series where we're talking about emotional intelligence. Right now, again, with everything that's happening in the world, emotional intelligence is such an important part of how we lead and the culture that we create with other people. And studies show us now that 58% of all performance, 58% of all performance is tied to emotional intelligence, which means our own awareness, our own ability to listen, and then our response is 58% of all of our performance. And so we're going to talk about that on the next episode, and certainly the next two episodes coming your way. Remember, the best leaders, teams, and cultures on the planet stimulate progress by recalibrating their thermostat. So good luck as a leader, as a team, and as a culture, stimulating progress by recalibrating your thermostat together. Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using. And share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to your organization, or you have a question or comment about this podcast, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we all are ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. Be a thermostat.